My name is Adam Parr, and I'm the host of the Pod City Podcast. This podcast focuses on motivation, mindset, positivity, mental health, and many other areas. In this podcast, I've connected with people from all different walks of life. You can connect with me on social media in the link below. And if you like this podcast, please like, share, and comment and subscribe because it really helps the channel and the podcast to grow. Now, without further ado, I hope you enjoy the video.
Tuning in, trying to find out how to win. Go along and tell a friend. Marathon, you know the game. Keep on running, never end. Getting better, make amend. Adam got it, Adam got it, Adam got it, Adam got it. Passivity, 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 passivity. Tune in.
Right, Eva, it's great to have you back on the podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Adam. Thanks for having me back.
No, you're welcome. It's really great to connect. I think last time we connected was like last summer. I think sometime last summer last year.
Oh, it was a while ago. It was a while ago.
Yeah. No, it's awesome to have you back. And yeah, I just kind of thought like kind of introducing you because you're like a high performance coach and you help like people in that kind of area, don't you, as well? And you've got like a book out recently that you mentioned to me. It's called The Intimacy of Race, and how you kind of came about that and what that's kind of about as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I really like helping people who, when they are really doing everything that they can to, have more money, more success, better health, better relationships. And what happens is, you know how people end up doing too much and they get burnt out and stressed out and overwhelmed. So when I bring into high performance coaching, I really help people learn how to prioritize and set boundaries so that they can have a better balance. And by balance, I don't mean equal, but just to really not sacrifice what's important to them when they are working so hard. And so, I'm running along with the business and everything's going great with my clients. I started this amazing group program. And then, I'm in America. The George Floyd incident happened. And I know that was worldwide. Everybody had heard about that. And, I was just about to launch my high performance group coaching, but I was really overcome with a lot of sadness and grief over literally watching this man be murdered by a police officer. And I remember I just couldn't stop crying. I was crying every night, but like really deep guttural cries. And if you know me really well, I'm not a crier. I'm just really kind of tough as nails and I can get through everything. And as a Black woman, we're almost kind of used to or numb to the fact that this is what happens to men, our Black men, and being in police custody. We almost got used to seeing Black men, being murdered by the police and the police brutality that seems to be predominantly towards people of color. And I remember thinking that I had to do something, I just couldn't have business as usual, but I didn't know what to do. And there was one morning, I have my high performance morning routine where, I do my workout and have my special drink. And I was sitting in my morning meditation, just really kind of feeling lost and wondering, what could I do? Like, I'm not going to go out and protest because we're in COVID and I'm a germaphobe, so I don't want to get sick. But I can't ignore it. It was kind of like there's an elephant in the room and I can't ignore it. And what dropped into me at that point was, and I've shared with you before that my husband's from Germany. So he is not African-American at all. And I saw on social media a lot of people who were either white presenting, or had a certain amount of privilege because of the color of their skin, really wanting to help, wanting to do something, wanting to use their voice, wanting to speak up about and against racism. However, they were saying all the wrong things, and it was making it worse. You were hearing things like, all lives matter, I don't see color, I was raised to treat everybody equally. And it was for the Black community, it was pouring salt in the wound. And it's the equivalent of, doing a fundraiser for breast cancer, and someone else comes on and says, well, what about lung cancer? Isn't lung cancer important? Well, yes, it is. But right now, this fundraiser is for breast cancer. And so it was, I saw their heart. Let me put it to you this way. I saw their heart, I saw their intention, but the things they were saying were making it worse. And so what dropped in for me right then was to create a safe space to share resources to help people learn not only why some of those phrases are wrong and some of the things that they were saying is wrong, but just resources in education to learn a little bit more about the history, to learn how to have these conversations, how to take a stand without being judged, without being criticized, without feeling the shame, the blame, and the guilt over making a mistake. Because what happens to people when they think about, what if I make a mistake? And especially on social media, Adam, you know how brutal, how brutal social media could be. And I thought, I'm going to create a safe space. And I started a Facebook group called The Intimacy of Race. So that's how that started. And so to continue the journey, I also wanted to do something a little bit more than creating, a really safe space on Facebook. I wanted to have a live forum. And I got together really 5 other powerful leading women of color together to be on a live forum. And they each had like a 20-minute presentation followed by Q&A. And that forum was called the Allyship Awareness Forum. And it was really for people to listen and to learn and to take notes and to take it all in and not be in a reactive, defensive mode. You know how people say, that's not me, I don't do that, I'm different, I'm special, I was raised differently. And we're like, no, it's time, metaphorically, to take your knee off of our necks so that we can speak and you can listen. And the book, and I know you're doing some video here, the book awesome. is a compilation of, it's actually a transcription of the live forum and infused with my personal stories of, my dad was actually a bodyguard to Martin Luther King Jr. a week before his assassination. So I infused a lot of my personal story and history in there, but also all of the amazing content those women shared as well.
That's amazing. And I think it's really great as well how you've, created this community and this group and this book, to provide value and to connect with, other people, from, like last year and some of the experiences and things that happened. I mean, there's a lot of distress and a lot of trauma and a lot of things that happened. And I think it's that kind of, how do I pronounce it? Like that unity, that kind of unity and that kind of unite between people and to connect. And I think people that's what people need during those times. People need that you kind of unity and connection and to feel heard and to share how they feel. Because I mean, there's like a lot of, like I said, a lot of people saying all lives matter and all these things, and there's a lot of controversy over that. And I think in my mind, it's wrong what happened. It shouldn't have happened, and things like that shouldn't happen. Like full stop. And I think there's a lot that needs to kind of be looked into, to prevent that from happening. But I think it's definitely great what you're doing to put out, your experience, your kind of what you like you said, your father. What he did and experiences, and to put everything into a book and to create that community as well.
Yeah, there was so much done this past year to create division and even deeper division, because just emotions were just so high and so raw. And how do you channel all of that? Because in the Black community, a lot of pain and trauma and grief was unleashed.
Mm.
And in the white community, a lot of guilt and shame for the history of this country that I live in, America, was being felt as well. And so you
Yeah.
had sides both experiencing traumatic events
Mm.
in a
Mm.
way. And at some points it became competing traumatic events. Like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
my trauma is deeper than your trauma. No, and so in order to not make it competing, but to really, the ugly history that this country has with racism has got to be faced. And for me personally, sharing stories and hearing people be surprised
Mm.
really confirmed how disconnected people are of the history of this country because of
Mm.
what's taught in school, but also how embedded systemic racism is into our fabric and our life and our way of being, that we don't even notice it.
Mm.
It's barely noticeable when you're a person of privilege. And so having people become more aware of what racism looks like and how it shows up to benefit you, how it shows
Mm.
up to disenfranchise other communities, really force people to look at some of the ugly truths about
Mm.
themselves, their family, their history, their generations. And it's really not an easy space to be. It's not an
Mm.
easy space to be. And so it's easier to deny it, to
Mm.
deny that it exists. And
Mm.
that's what keeps racism alive, is
Yeah.
denying that it exists.
Yeah. So I think, like you said, it's, people need to, I think there needs to be some kind of like education on it. There needs to be like more kind of awareness kind of taught to people around, history and what kind of, to me, some kind of like education somewhere and knowledge on it. Because I think like a lot of the time, people in families, might think a certain way and then their kids all think a certain way because their parents are thinking X, Y, Z. And it's like, well, there's a whole wide world out there. And people can just get caught up into thinking a certain way, and I think it's wrong. And I think all people at the end of the day, regardless of sexual orientation or like skin color, that kind of thing, all one. And it's crazy that you see certain things and hear certain things, and that people think certain ways. And I mean,
I mean,
it's
have you noticed how unleashed people who have racist ideals and values, the freedom that they felt
mm,
in America? I'm sure I know the world has been watching us for at least the last 4 years
mm,
with the leadership that we had in place, and just
yeah,
how bold and embrazened people were with their hate
mm,
and their hate rhetoric. And I'll be honest with you, those were not the people that concerned me.
mm,
What concerned me is the people who had been hiding how they really feel
yeah,
all of this time. And then all of a sudden, they had permission to share it in a bold, empowered way based on the leadership that we had in this country up
mm,
until recently. And
mm.
it was scary. It was really scary to witness.
Yeah, I definitely pay attention to the news, some news outlets, and I've got friends who live in, like yourself, live in the States, and they update me on what's happening. And yeah, it was pretty crazy to see. And I think it's almost like a pressure. It felt, for me, it was like a pressure cooker.
Mhm,
Like just with COVID as well on top of that, and everything happening, it was
mhm.
like things could just pop off. And it's a scary situation to be in. I don't know how. I know there was lots of riots and things like that in like New York, and
There were riots and protests everywhere. Well, there were protests everywhere. Let me put it
yeah,
to you that way. Some of the bigger cities saw some rioting, which actually gave the whole Black Lives Matter movement a bad name. But when
mm,
you look closely, there's people all over were quoting Dr. Martin Luther King and nonviolence, but one of the things Dr. King did say that I quote a lot is that the rioting is as a result of voices not being heard. It's the language of the
Yeah.
unheard. And, we have been talking about this problem for a long, long time, but have really been unheard. We've literally had a knee on our necks metaphor. I think it's so
Yeah.
metaphoric how this man was murdered by the police officer
Mm.
was, a knee on his neck. And that's how it's felt for us. And
Mm.
the fact that it happened during a lockdown and during COVID exposed it at a
Yeah.
higher degree, that people were in their homes watching the news over and over again. And, it just broke open something in people, some good, some bad, but the dam was
Mm.
burst, and people just wanted to be heard. And we came to the point where, it's enough, it's enough.
Mm.
And,
Mm.
I look at it as, ways that have become resilient to
Mm.
the injustices, and being raised in the same society that promulgates racist ideals. I've taken on some of them myself, in my opinion, of my own people and my own community. I mean, that's how embedded it is in the
Mm.
fabric of this country. This country, America, was built on racist ideals, values, and principles. And the more
Mm.
I started doing more of my research and education for myself, the more, I don't want to say enraged, but the more
Yeah.
pain I came in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to channel that to make a difference. And
Mm.
that's why, I have the group going. I go in live in the group, sometimes with a guest, sometimes with me, to just
Mm.
really share more things to help people become more aware and conscious and intentional to make a difference. And that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah. No, it's awesome, what you're doing. And I think, these little, little tiny, like, how can I put it? It's like seeds, isn't it? You're planting these seeds, and they're kind of like, kind of growing and kind of blossoming. And I think that's like, the way of starting, isn't it? You're planting these positive seeds and getting people together, and putting that forward. I think that's, and I think by doing that, more people are going to do that as well, and more people are going to get involved and create that kind of positive, those positive connections, and that kind of like, that voice across, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I love how you use the analogy of seeds. I do that a lot because the problem is a lot of us try to plant seeds when the ground is still hard and frozen.
Yeah.
And so the first thing we have to do is prepare the soil. And that's what I'm
Yeah.
hoping the book does. The book
Mm.
is supposed to prepare the soil so that we can learn how to plant seeds and have those
Mm.
seeds start to germinate and take
Mm.
root. And so
Yeah.
we really are in the soil preparation stage of this
Mm.
so that our seeds can grow.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
it. That's it. And I think it's really nice, and I think it's that, like how the impact it's going to have in a positive way on people. And you're following something that you feel strongly about and you're passionate about. And I think everyone should do that. Like, if they feel passionate about something, they have something to say, to kind of do these kind of things. And I think,
Yeah.
like, with racism and many other things, it's something, like you said, it's gone on for a long time. And it's almost like, I think in people's, DNA, it's in your DNA, isn't it? And
Yes.
I like I won't go on by myself too much, but like, my ancestors, like Native American on my granddad's side. And if people cut down trees near me, it's like I feel it. I
Mm.
can't explain it, and I'm like, I feel angry, and I'm like, I can't explain why I'm feeling what I'm feeling, but it's things like that. And I think to myself, oh yeah, it goes back. It's in my DNA. And I think, with this, there's definitely a lot there. And I think this is kind of the way forward, by doing groups, by educating other people on it. And I think it's something that is gaining more momentum now. These positive movements, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And and it's interesting you should mention that because, the more research I do, the more I'm learning how trauma is not only held in the body, but it's passed down through the generations. And it was a new experience for me to experience that level of grief and trauma over watching somebody I don't know. Like, I
Yeah,
love a good murder mystery. I was sharing
yeah,
with you offline how I love the a lot of the British crime drama
yeah,
series that we've been catching up with on Netflix. So I watch this all the time. That's one of my favorite subjects when I was in high school was forensic scientists and
yeah,
fingerprinting and how you catch the criminal. So I actually like that stuff, which is why I put trackers on everybody's phone. So in case I need to find their bodies, that's what I tell my family. But
yeah.
to feel that level of pain and grief was so new to me that it scared me. And I really
Mm,
thought, is this what ancestral grief and trauma feel
sure,
like?
yeah.
People talk about, you know, the blacks in this country, the way we're thought of, we're overweight, we're not healthy, we have high blood pressure and diabetes. And the more I'm studying to see how the history of trauma lives in
Mm,
our body and contributes to a lot of the diseases that are
mm,
prevalent in our history and our generation,
mm,
along with lack of access in some communities to fresh fruits and vegetables and organic
yeah.
foods. I mean, I'm blessed. I live in California. I have a
Mm,
garden and, I've got access to organic stuff and I've always have been, but
yeah.
some of the other poor communities don't. And then you go into how victims are blamed for their circumstances. I
Mm,
mean, one of the things I was hearing a lot was, well, what about black on black crime? And what about what you guys do to each other? And what about this? And what about that? And that's victim shaming and blaming, which is
yeah,
very,
yeah.
very hurtful and destructive. And so when you when you try to educate yourself more, and it really is about education, because
Mm,
I honestly didn't know that the reason why a lot of Black families historically have these such serious health problems
mm,
is from the traumatic experiences passed down
mm,
through the generations. It's like,
yeah.
oh, now it makes sense because, we all can be guilty of victim shaming and blaming.
Mm,
If you only ate better, if you only did this, well, if you're
mm,
historically oppressed, I mean, I really have a soft spot now, a bigger soft spot for how hard it is for Black men in America, especially if their skin color is really dark or they have a certain look
mm,
that white people will associate with fear
mm,
and attack and menacing because of how someone looks. I mean, could you
mm,
imagine going through life being judged because your skin is just too dark?
mm.
I just can't.
It's it's really a terrible thing, and I think I experienced that. I witnessed that. I was how old was I? I must have been like 15, 14, 15 years old when I lived in Nottingham. Like quite a big city,
Mm,
and one of my friends was black and was walking through this town. Police officers stopped my friend,
mm,
search my right, like they call it like I don't know what the actual name, but like a random stop and search. They don't
mhm.
really do it as much now, but
Profiling, they call it here.
yeah. And they they,
Racial
they
profiling.
stopped him and they searched him and then searched me, my friend, and we were white. And these two guys searched my friend, and I
Mm.
was like, well, I wasn't doing anything wrong, and I couldn't believe it. And that
Yeah.
was one of
Could
the
you
first. I think that
imagine
was
going through life like that with that kind of fear? And especially being in the United States, that's how a lot of these murders from the hands of the police happen.
yeah.
It's just, I have a whole new outlook,
Mm,
perspective on it
mm,
than I did before. I mean, even some of the stories my dad shared about being a Black police officer,
yeah.
uh, a handful on the police force in the 60s. And, you know, and I was a young child in the 60s, and the white officers would not allow him in the squad car because of his color. So he had to be on motorcycle detail, which is, you know, really was intimidating as a little girl
Yeah.
seeing your dad and, you know, the motorcycle stuff and the helmet and stuff. It was pretty cool. He looked really
Yeah.
good. I was like, that's
Yeah.
my daddy. But then he was pulled off of that detail, Adam, when Martin Luther King Jr. came to our hometown, and this was in 1968.
Yeah.
And he couldn't figure out why he was chosen. He wasn't a plainclothes officer, he was in
Mm.
uniform, but they needed plainclothes officers. And he found out after the fact that because there were death threats against Martin Luther King Jr., they didn't want any of the white officers in harm's way.
Mm.
So they pulled the African Americans to guard him in case Dr. King got shot. And he did get shot a week later when he went to Memphis.
Jeez. Yeah, it does baffle me, you know, with when things like that happen and how things are set up and organized, and you know things you know need to change. And I think it's I watched a documentary called Flint Town. Have you ever seen Flint Town? It's
I've heard of it, about the water in Flint, Michigan, right?
yeah, and it focuses on the police force in Flint, and there was like you know a lot of kind of racism between like you know police officers, you know the white and black police officers, because you know over who they were voting for, and you know the election was going on, and you think you know, cry, this is in the police. You know the police are meant to be doing their job, protecting people, and all this is going on.
Do you
But
know how the police got started? They
no,
were
no.
originally slave catchers. That's how, in America, the modern day
Mm,
police force began.
mm,
Because if you were Black out walking around at a certain hour or whatever, unaccompanied by your master or whatever, or when you were a slave trying to escape, the police were organized originally to catch slaves who were trying to escape. And that mentality is still
mm,
historically in the police force.
mm,
And that's why the random searches,
mm,
because as it evolved, it's like if they saw an African American out and about, they
mm.
were suspicious. Why are you out? Which happened in slave times. And you had to have a letter or a note from your master if you were out running an errand for your master that you had permission to be out and about. And, you know, and so the police officers were put in place. They called them slave catchers back then, to make
Ta,
sure that there were no random Negroes out and about when they shouldn't be or didn't have permission.
yeah, ta,
So that's why it's
yeah.
in the history of, you know, the birth of the police officers. They were originally
Mm.
slave catchers, and so that's why that mentality is in there.
It's insane, isn't it? And I think I've heard about I listen to Joe Rogan's podcast quite a lot, and he had oh, what's his name? I can't think of his name. He had that that guy on who he's he basically kind of gets people to leave the KKK. If that makes sense, he kind of do you know the
Mm,
did you see that he's quite a
no,
big guy.
no,
He
I don't know this guy, but um, I've heard of people who.
yeah, and he you know experienced racism growing up, and he talked about it, and you know through educating people, you know people in the KKK, he convinced them to you know made them leave, because he said you know kind of woke them up a little bit, you know explaining you know how things are. And you know like Joe Rogan said, you know the police forces need to be educated, you know they need to you know be educated in their training,
Mm,
and that's kind of I think you know one of the main issues is you know they need to be educated and to be trained properly, and not to do things in a certain way. And you know
yeah.
people need to have that education, at an early age and throughout life. And it's, but I think, in what you're doing, it's planting those seeds to prevent, things from happening, if that makes sense, and people thinking a
No,
certain
you can
way.
only do like one
Yeah,
person at a time, right?
yeah, yeah.
And hopefully that has a ripple effect. But,
Mm,
when people say the system is broken, especially here in America, I'm really quick to let you know that it's not broken. The
no.
system was designed to do exactly what it's doing, and that was
Mm,
to keep free laboring slaves. They just
mm,
call it the prison system now, which is
yeah.
why the prison system is so overly populated with men of color and women of color
Mm,
as well,
mm,
because there is a Netflix documentary called 13 that explains how that was. It was about the ratification of the 13th Amendment
yeah.
and how they made certain things crimes so that they could put African Americans in jail, and how these big companies use prison labor, which is free labor, to keep
Mm,
their companies up and running. So it was really, when slaves were freed, it really destroyed a lot of capitalism in the United States. And you
yeah.
know what happens when you hurt people in their wallets? They get really, really upset and they do
Yeah.
everything to stop that. So it really takes ratification of the system.
Yeah.
The
There's
system as it is needs to be broken and rebuilt.
yeah. There's so many kind of links to it, isn't there? It just kind of, there's so many connections and links to it. And I think, um, I feel like sorry for people, like you hear it, in both white families as well, but like, like kind of single parents, like a lot of single parents and black people growing up, and have, having, they need to have, all people need to have, like a positive role model or mentor and that kind
Mhm.
of thing. And I actually had a good friend of mine on the podcast. He's got his own podcast, and he's called Derek Oxley. And he was saying, like, when he was growing up, his dad wasn't around, and he said, like, the principal at school kind of kept him on track.
Mm.
He said all he was bothered about was doing drugs and being with his friends and doing stuff. And he comes from, like black race and background, and he was saying, it really helped him having that kind of role model. And I think that's something that, you know a lot of people need as well. Because I think, it's just what I hear about, in the media.
Mhm. Yeah, it really is important to have influencers and people in your life who can role model the way. The problem is with how the prison system and the criminal justice system was set up, how many families that destroyed and broken up and didn't give these young boys an opportunity to have role models, and to have positive role models, and to really resort to behaviors for survival. And
Mm,
so you've got to really look closer at, like, Black History Month is the month of February, and it is
yeah.
about the Black family.
Mm,
That's kind of the theme about the traditions, the love and the connection and the families. But the way the system was built in the United States destroyed so many Black families on a kind of a repeat
mm,
cycle, if you will, and doesn't really give people a chance to thrive. When
mm,
you're always in survival mode, you cannot thrive. It's
mm,
just not healthy. I mean, we just see it now, affecting a lot of families in COVID. Everybody's
mm,
trying to survive, survive, survive. That is so taxing on the nervous system and
mm,
on your mental health and your physical energy to just want to survive.
yeah.
Most marginalized communities, like the Black communities, don't have opportunity to be in the thrive, to really take it to
Yeah.
that next level and thrive and do well, because of the racist ideals and principles that are weaved into the system to keep us just trying to survive. And it's unfortunate, but I'm hopeful. I'm
Mm,
hopeful that now that people are aware, they can do what they
yeah.
need to do personally, at home, at work, in their communities, so that they
Mm,
can be a part of the change, be a
mm.
part of the transformation, but not just while things are in the news,
No.
but really just sustain it and make it a part of your life, which is why this
Mm,
book is so
mm,
important, because it
yeah.
really helps you know what you can do
Mm,
yourself, what action steps you can do to make a difference. And it doesn't have to be anything, like for me, it didn't take me to go out and protest and hold a sign and, be on the front steps anywhere screaming. It just took me creating something privately, sitting on my bed in a meditation and virtually making a difference.
Yeah. No, that's it. And I think I really applaud you for what you've done. And I think it's really lovely that, you've made this and you've created this group and you created this book, and you're making a positive difference in the planting these seeds as well, for other people to to learn and take value from and to do their part as well. I think it's really something. I think especially in the kind of the time and day that we're in,
Yeah.
kind of coming together and doing that.
Yeah.
But then no, you're welcome. It's been really, really great talking to you and hearing about what you've been doing and the topics that we've been talking about as well. I think they're really important to touch on in life and to gain more understanding on. And where can people find you, like your social media and like your website and your book and that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, you can contact me at talkwitheva.com. So that's an easy way to find me. And the book is just my name, evamedilek.com, and then / the Intimacy of Race book. And then you can really learn, it's available in the UK, it's available all over the world. So through Amazon. So I appreciate the support. I appreciate the shout out. It's an easy read. And it really is how you can take just some personal responsibility to show up as an ally in your own life. So thank you for the opportunity. And you can go to the Intimacy of Race on Facebook and join that too. That's always fun.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'll definitely promote you. I'll definitely promote what you're doing, and I'll definitely join the group and promote everything. So and I'll get a copy of it as well, and I'll promote that.
I hope you do. I hope you do. And maybe we'll have you as a guest in the Intimacy of Race group.
Yeah, it'll be awesome. No, I look forward to it. It'll be good.
Yeah. Cool. All
Awesome.
Right.
But you're welcome. But no, have a great day and all the best in what you're doing.
You too, honey. Bye.
Take care. My name is Adam Parr, and I'm the host of the Positivity Podcast. This podcast focuses on motivation, mindset, positivity, mental health, and many other areas. In this podcast, I've connected with people from all different walks of life. You can connect with me on social media in the link below. And if you like this podcast, please like, share, and comment and subscribe, because it really helps the channel and the podcast to grow. Now, without further ado, I hope you enjoy the video.
Tuning in, trying to find out how to win. Go along and tell a friend. Marathon, you know the game. Keep on running, never end. Getting better, make amend. Adam got it, Adam got it, Adam got it, Adam got it. Passivity, 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 passivity.